Today our scripture is from Luke chapter 7, verses 36 to 50, using the Inclusive Bible. One of the Pharisees invited Jesus to dinner. Jesus went to his house and reclined at table. A woman who had a low reputation in that town came to the house. She had heard that Jesus was dining with the Pharisees, so she brought with her an alabaster jar of perfumed oil. She stood behind Jesus crying, and her tears fell on his feet. Then she dried his feet with her hair, kissed them, and anointed them with oil. When the Pharisee saw this, he said to himself, "If this fellow were the prophet, he'd know who this woman is that is touching him, and what a low reputation she has." In answer to the Pharisee's thoughts, Jesus said, "Simon, I have something to tell you." "Tell me, teacher," he said. Two people owed money to a creditor. One owed the creditor the equivalent of 2 years' wages, the other 2 months' wages. Both were unable to pay, so the creditor wrote off both debts. Which of them was more grateful to the moneylender? Simon answered, "I suppose the one who owed more." Jesus said, "You're right." Turning to the woman, he said to Simon, "See this woman? I came into your house, and you gave me no water to wash my feet, but she has washed them with her tears and dried them with her hair. You gave me no kiss of greeting, but she covered my feet with kisses. You didn't anoint my head with oil, but she anointed my feet with oil. For this reason I tell you, her sins, which are many, have been forgiven. See how much she loves? But the one who is forgiven little loves little." Then Jesus said to the woman, "Your sins are forgiven." Those also sitting at the table began to ask among themselves, "Who is this who even forgives sins?" Meanwhile, Jesus said to her, "Your faith has saved you. Go in peace."
May God open the eyes of our hearts to see as God sees. Several Sundays ago, we saw God of many names. The next Sunday, we saw God at the center of everything, a centered set, not bounded by the constrictions of our sight, in a bounded set. God creates us in God's image. We are not to create God in our image by placing a boundary on God in a bounded set. God is the one whose center is everywhere and circumference is nowhere. I learned that from Richard Rohr, who also taught us that we see God with the eyes God sees us. To do so, we see with more than our eyes, or more than our eyes actually take in. We see with the eyes of our hearts. Who we see, what we see, how we see matters. And who we don't see, how we don't see, and what we don't see matters. In people and creation. Recall a time when you were in awe and wonder with what you were seeing. A glorious sunset or a breathtaking sunrise. Celebrating a life-transforming ritual or a baby's beaming smile. a beautiful work of art, or a blade of grass, or a rock. As again, Richard teaches us, you learn to love by loving a rock. That elemental part of the earth. You are seeing the mystery and the meaning of life and creation when the eyes of our hearts are opened in that way. Your eyes behold beauty and awe, wonder, mystery beyond words. We call it seeing with the eyes of the heart, or seeing with the eyes of Jesus. In our gospel this morning that Karen just read for us, there are three characters who reveal ways of seeing: a Pharisee, a woman, and Jesus. First, we see a Pharisee. Contrary to the stereotype of Pharisees as the ultimate hypocrite, Pharisees were actually the most liberal religious group of their time. This Pharisee was offended by Jesus, by the woman in Jesus. However, he didn't chide the woman or throw her out of the house. He did see the woman as an uninvited sinner and Jesus as an unwitting person in the story. But it was an internal conversation that he was having and noting in a critical way. But he didn't make a scene by having her thrown out. He sees with privileged eyes upholding a discriminating system, a social system. Now, notice in the story, when we heard the story, at the first part, he's identified as the Pharisee. When Jesus begins to speak to him, Jesus gives him a name, Simon, speaks his name. He's a person now. Second, we see a woman whose sin is already forgiven. Unnamed as a woman in the city who was a sinner, like the Pharisee, this identified, the woman identified as a city woman and a sinner has led to misinterpretation. There is no biblical justification for presuming this woman to be a prostitute. We are not told that. That's a later imposition into the story from the hearers, readers of the story. But she's identified as a woman of the city. She is so overwhelmed with already having been forgiven that she comes into this uninvited place and does the undone thing by, with her tears, her hair, anointment, kissing Jesus' feet, and so on, in this house where she has not been invited. She intimately offers tears, kisses, hair, ointment, caressing Jesus' feet. She truly sees Jesus with her heart. And then third, of course, Jesus. And Jesus sees both Simon and the woman with his heart seeing into their heart. He sees Simon's internal critical dialogue. And he says, Simon, I have something to say to you. Now, I hear this, we could hear it different ways. I hear this more invitational than critical. Simon, I have something to say to you. Because he wants to invite him into a different way of seeing. And as a good liberal, Simon wants to hear what Jesus says. And teacher, speak. Jesus tells Simon about the two debtors that we just heard and being forgiven big and small debts. Then comes the heart of this gospel story. Jesus looks at the woman who's down behind him. He's reclining and eating, and this woman is behind him. he looks at the woman and speaks to Simon. Simon, do you see this woman? Do you see this woman? Jesus sees Simon's class conscious inhospitality. You didn't wash, kiss, anoint me. This woman hasn't stopped offering intimate, loving hospitality since I arrived. Jesus sees this woman in the context of systemic oppression. To truly see someone, we have to see them as they are, not as who we are. Jesus' benedictory word is to bless this woman. Your faith has saved you, go in peace, as an invitation to Simon into that same space. On our CPT delegations, Community Peacemaker Teams delegations, we begin each day with a contemplation and orientation. And we end each day with reflection and debriefing. In our debriefing, we ask 3 questions. Who did you see today? What did you hear today? How does who you see and what you hear inform and transform you? I'm going to invite you into an exercise in seeing based on this story. Do you see this woman? It's called Visio Divina. Now, some of us, that's how we see, divine seeing. Some of us gather on Zoom on Monday morning and do Lectio Divina, the reading and hearing, reflecting on the Word together. You're all invited to join that on Monday morning, 9:30. But this is Visio Divina, seeing and praying with the eyes of your heart. Visio Divina is similar to Lectio Divina, but it's with words. So I'm going to have, Anish, would you pass these out to everyone and send them around here as well? And they will go up on the screen for the Zoom people here for us. Our exercise of Visio Divina is with pictures, so I didn't identify this. A little bit later, I'll tell you a little bit more about these pictures. As you get one, I'm going to invite you to turn to this, the page with 2 pictures. There should be plenty to go around, so. Does everybody have one yet? Here in the back yet? Here, there's, do you want one? Here, are you okay? So just sit with us a minute and look at the ones, this picture, the one with 2 pictures, first at the top, and just meditate on that a moment in silence. Now, if you would just turn two people together, talk to each other about what you see, just for 2 minutes. What are you seeing? You can, I'm reluctant to break into your good seeing, but I want to hear from you. What I would love to do is take an hour with you and guide you through a whole process with this in a contemplative way that would let us see. But it would invite, do we have the handheld mic that Dan or someone can bring around? Tell us what you're seeing. What did you discover in your seeing here? In either of those two pictures, or in both of them? Who would like to? Robert.
Well, I see both pictures represent, or to me, the wall that's been built between the U.S. and Mexico. On one side is a vain attempt to disguise it, to make it beautiful. The other side is totally non-caring, it's brutal. And Sally remarked on how incredibly tall it is.
On what?
How tall it is.
Oh, yeah.
And how minimal or how small man looks against it. So,
Yeah. Thank you. Who else?
Let's go to the nearest person.
The wall reminds me of both fear and longing. Fear on one side to feel protected, to keep people away that they're afraid of, and longing to be a part of or to belong in the other way.
Yep. Great. Thank you. Maribeth.
I kind of had three thoughts. One, like Robert was saying, like I couldn't decide if it was at the same location, if both of these sides are on the American side, if one side's in one country and one side's the other. And then Anise said, well, maybe it's the same section at a different time. So, like, there's a couple different thoughts on that.
Good questions. Good thoughts. Who else? Yeah. Mira.
Well, the grass is always greener on the other side of the fence.
Brent over here in CAC.
Well, the top one clearly looks like the wall, as imagined by the former president, I think. And the people that are standing there seem comfortable, safe, nonchalant, white. They're not escaping. They don't have backpacks or kids or anything like that. The bottom one almost looks like mural art.
Yeah.
And perhaps to remind whatever community about the wall because of the barbed wire along the top there. And it's just a regular sidewalk, so I don't feel like that bottom one is a part of the wall. Mm-hmm. And there's a tree that you can climb.
Thank you. Like most of you, I assumed that this was between the U.S. and Mexico. I think suddenly this wall could be anywhere. It could be in Israel, Palestine.
Exactly.
It could be in Berlin. And it's deliberately vague, side or the other side, but it changed, your view of the wall changes depending on your perspective.
Anybody else want to? Yes.
I thought the Middle East, which may or may not be, but I guess the first thing that struck me about either of them, but especially the top one, they're open, so you can still communicate with somebody on the other side. It's not totally separating people.
Thank you. Well, we don't have a lot of time, so I'll leave it there to say just, you're right. This is the wall in Mexico. I'm leading a CPT Borderlands delegation here in October to this. This is Douglas Agua Prieta, Douglas, Arizona, Agua Prieta on the Sonora, Mexico side, where I've been numerous times and where we have CPTers working with asylum seekers and so on. And you're right also that they're not the opposite sides of the same wall. Oh, by the way, the three people in the picture are my wife, Margaret, and my twin brother, Sheldon, and sister-in-law, Mim, when they were with us there a couple of years ago. That wall, this is on the US side, further east of Douglas. The wall is actually, yes, lower and older, where the mural is, and that's on the Mexican side, because what Mexicans did on their side was turn it into a work of art, instead of just being a wall. Through the city, through Agua Prieta, there, it's all painted with these murals for quite a long way. So even with this place of power that keeps them from roaming, to connect with what you shared, Pam, and this land where people have roamed and lived for thousands of years that now is walled off and keeps them from connecting to their people and their land for ages past, they have turned it into this work of art and said, okay, we're gonna paint it that way. So that's just one way of helping us see. Turn on the other side now, and I'll say just a little bit more. If this is where I would like to take you for like an hour session of Visio Divina. And it might, because we're running out of time here, just, anyone want to just say what you see here? Rob.
Just at first glance, instead of like a bare fence like we just saw that was separating things, is like total chaos, like my lawn when I have a motor for a while. You find stuff all over.
There are words on this one that give a hint.
What the heck with the words? I see the people trying to hear each other through the wall, and the animals don't care about said wall. They're going nose to nose.
Thank you, Brent. Karen.
I see what looks like a stable scene with a traditional Mary with blue robe, Joseph behind her, maybe some wise men, shepherds, or whatever on the other side. I don't see that as a wall. I see it as a beam of light from heaven, because it's shining into the stable where Jesus is born.
One more? Anyone else want to? Chloe.
Yeah, I think it's interesting is that, like, it's not, to me, I was like, oh, this kind of looks like a manger scene, but, like,
Yes.
there's no baby Jesus in it. Like, it's kind of, it's been, at least not that I can see, maybe it's like a Where's Waldo manger. And so that's then when I was like, okay, am I seeing this right? And that's when then I, like, used the words for context. And, yeah, I think it's challenging you to, yeah, like, to search for the Christ, the dawn from on high will break upon us, this, like, coming of light and revelation, which seems to be, like, scary and chaotic, but also, like, right, it's gilded, it's, like, golden and joyful, and causes us to embrace, well, right at the front, there's this bull that looks, like, very uncomfortable and is, like, jumping back, and it's, like, that maybe that's part of our call, is to embrace the dawn and to see things in a new way, in spite of how scary it is.
Thank you. So we could go on with this, but I'm going to let it there and say just a little bit about this. You all know I'm connected to St. John's Abbey as a Benedictine oblate. I often introduce myself in unknown places as a Mennonite pastor and part-time monk. St. John's Abbey in 2001 had the idea of, for the first time in 500 years, of writing a new manuscript Bible, which became this, written, which the monks used to do before the printing press. But that's how we got printing, from monastic communities that printed things. And they got Donald Jackson from the United Kingdom had, for a lifetime as an artist, a calligrapher and artist, had envisioned writing a new Bible with art. And so they did. It took about 15 years to create an entire new Bible. This is Luke's gospel. I have most of them in this. I can't tell you all of it, except Donald Jackson took a group of people, artists in the UK and at St. John's Abbey. It began when I was at St. John's Abbey on sabbatical in 2001 with an opening, and created all of this art that's now in museums and churches and places around the world. And then there are other versions of it made in like this book of all of it. This is the birth narrative or the opening piece for Luke's gospel, which is my favorite gospel. And like poetry, it is meant to open your eyes and let you, you can forever find meaning and vision and depth and mystery and everything in it. It's not something you just, okay, I see this and it means this. It's much more open, drawing us into it than that. And the print is all in calligraphy in fascinating ways, but this is one of my favorite pieces in the St. John's Bible work of art. And it is a way of Visio Divina that leads us into what is it we see, who do we see, how do we see, and where does that lead us? Open, seeing with the eyes of our heart, to see God as God sees us, is what is meant to draw us into. So Jesus names us and has something to say to us and asks us, do you see this woman? And the particularity of this woman opens up to the universality of what it means to be human and the fullness and mystery of life. Answering Jesus' question by seeing what Jesus sees calls for open hearts, open eyes and heart. Seeing with the eyes of our heart calls for our fullest attention, intention, awareness, consciousness, compassion, and commitment. To truly see this woman means three things. First, seeing another human being created in God's image. Second, seeing what prevents our eyes from seeing this woman. Third, seeing the dehumanizing systems that make this woman unseen. When we do not see what Jesus sees, we cannot answer Jesus' question. And when we cannot answer Jesus' question, we do not follow Jesus. Visio Divina helps discipline the eyes of our heart to see what Jesus sees.
Let's now turn in voices together to number 712.